There was a moment in history when the future looked different than it does now. Not just a little different, completely different. It was the 1950s, and if you opened a magazine, turned on your television, or walked through the doors of a World's Fair exhibition, you'd see something remarkable. You'd see tomorrow, and tomorrow looked bright. The paintings were everywhere. Families boarding sleek rocket ships for weekend trips to the moon, chrome-plated robots serving breakfast in suburban kitchens, cities floating above the clouds, connected by personal helicopters that anyone could fly, meals that came in pills or tubes, freeing mothers from hours at the stove, cars powered by tiny atomic reactors that would run for years without refueling. It wasn't science fiction. At least, that's not how it was presented. These were plans. These were predictions from engineers and scientists who'd just won a world war with their knowledge. These were the people who'd split the atom and built machines that could think. When they told you what was coming, you listened. And it wasn't just in the magazines, it was on television every Saturday morning, in shows that millions of children watched together. It was in the newsreels at the movie theater. It was in the speeches that presidents gave, talking about mankind's destiny among the stars. It was in the classrooms where teachers told students to study hard because the future would need them, would need their minds and their hands to build the moon bases and Mars colonies that were surely coming. The timeline felt solid. Most estimates put moon bases around 1970, maybe 1975. Mars colonies by 1985 or 1990. Atomic cars were expected by the late 60s. Personal robots by the early 70s. It all fit together. It all made sense. Every year brought new breakthroughs that proved progress was real, that the impossible kept becoming possible. Jets replaced propeller planes. Rockets reached higher and higher. Computers, enormous machines that filled entire rooms, began doing calculations that would have taken humans years. The direction was clear. The destination was obvious. Families talked about it over dinner. Which child might grow up to be an astronaut? Which one might work in a moon base? Would they take a vacation to Mars someday, the way they now drove to see the Grand Canyon? It wasn't fantasy. It was planning. It was the same kind of thinking that had led their own parents to move west, to settle new territories, to build lives in places that had once seemed impossibly far away. The 1950s weren't that long ago. If you were young then, you remember it. You remember what it felt like to live in that moment, to absorb that certainty, to believe with everyone around you that the world was about to change in ways that would make everything better. You remember the excitement, the anticipation, the sense that you were living at the hinge of history, watching one age end and another begin. This is the story of that future, not the one we got, but the one we expected, the one we were promised, the one that felt so real, so close, so inevitable that we never doubted it would arrive. There was a time when Saturday mornings meant something different than they do now. You'd wake up early, not because you had to, but because you wanted to. The house was quiet. Your parents were still asleep. And you'd tiptoe down the hallway in your pajamas, careful not to make the floorboards creak, and you'd turn on the television set. It took a moment to warm up. You'd sit there on the carpet, watching that little dot of light in the center of the screen grow bigger and bigger until suddenly there were voices and pictures, and you were somewhere else entirely. You were in space, or you were about to be. The shows had names like Space Patrol and Tom Corbett, Space Cadet. Captain Video was there too, fighting for justice somewhere out among the stars. And for that half hour or hour, you weren't in your living room anymore. You were out there with them. Everyone watched these shows. It wasn't just you. It was your friends down the street, your cousins in the next town over, kids all across the country. On Monday morning at school, that's what you talked about. What happened in the latest episode? Whether the hero would escape from the asteroid base, what the rocket ships looked like. You'd argue about it at lunch, draw pictures of it in the margins of your notebook when the teacher wasn't looking. It was real to you in a way that's hard to explain now. Not real like you thought it was actually happening, but real like you knew it would happen. Soon. Maybe by the time you grew up. Maybe sooner. The rocket ships always looked so clean and shining. Chrome and silver with fins that swept back like something fast and powerful. They had names stenciled on the side in bold letters. They made a whooshing sound when they took off, and inside there were control panels with lights and switches and buttons. The captain would sit in a chair that looked almost like the chair in your father's Studebaker, and he'd pull back on a lever and off they'd go. Just like that. As easy as starting the car and backing out of the driveway. And they weren't alone out there. There were space stations, huge wheels spinning slowly against the darkness. There were moon bases with domes you could see from Earth if you had a good telescope. There were mining operations on asteroids and colonies being built on Mars. It was all connected, all part of the same future that was coming. The announcers on the shows talked about it that way, matter of fact, like it was already decided. Sometimes after the show ended, you'd go outside and look up. The sky in the daytime didn't show you much, just blue and clouds and maybe a plane passing overhead leaving a white trail. But you knew what was up there beyond the blue. You knew about the moon, about the planets, about all that empty space waiting for someone to cross it. And you knew, the way you knew anything when you were young, that someone would. That someone was probably already building the ships that would do it. Maybe in a factory somewhere, or in a secret government laboratory. Maybe your own father knew someone who worked on them. It felt that close. Your parents watched the shows sometimes, too. Not always, but sometimes. Your father would sit in his chair with the newspaper, and he'd look up at the screen and nod. Your mother would be in the kitchen, but she'd call out questions. When do they think we'll really go to the moon? Could be 10 years, your father might say. Could be less if they keep at it. And that seemed reasonable. 10 years wasn't that long. You'd still be young. You might even go yourself if you studied hard, if you became a pilot or a scientist or an engineer. The path was there. You just had to follow it. The shows came on every week, and every week they showed you more. New planets, new aliens, new problems that needed solving. But the ships were always there. The bases were always there. The future was always there, waiting. And you never got tired of it. You never thought, this is silly, or this is just make-believe. Because it wasn't make-believe. Not really. It was a preview. It was a promise. When the show ended and the screen went back to whatever else was on, you'd stay sitting there for a minute, still thinking about it, still seeing those silver ships in your mind. And then you'd get up and go have breakfast, or go outside to play, or do whatever else Saturday had in store. But a part of you was still out there. A part of you stayed in space. That's what Saturday mornings were. They were the beginning of something. They were the feeling that the world was about to change, and you were going to be there to see it happen. Every week the shows reminded you. Every week they told you the same thing. The future is coming. The future is bright. The future is just around the corner. And we believed it. All of us. Together. The magazines came in the mail, thick and glossy, and you'd flip through them at the kitchen table while your mother made dinner. Life magazine, Look, Collier's, the Saturday Evening Post. They all had them. Those paintings. Those beautiful, detailed paintings of what was coming. And what you saw there wasn't science fiction. It was science fact. At least, that's how they presented it. That's how it felt. There'd be a rocket ship, but it wasn't like the ones on television. It was bigger, roomier, more like a house that could fly. And inside, there'd be a family. A father in the pilot's seat, wearing a casual shirt, his hand on the controls. A mother in the galley kitchen, preparing a meal, smiling, her hair perfect, even in zero gravity. Children looking out the portholes at the stars, pointing at something, excited. A dog sometimes, just floating there, happy. The articles that went with the pictures talked about it seriously. Engineers were quoted, scientists from universities and research centers. They'd explain how the ships would work, how the engines would fire, how long the trip would take. To the moon, maybe 3 days. To Mars, a few months, but comfortable months. The ships would spin to create artificial gravity, so you wouldn't float around unless you wanted to. There'd be sleeping quarters, a bathroom, a place to sit and read or play cards, everything you needed. And the reason for going wasn't some emergency or military mission. It was vacation. It was seeing new places. It was the same reason your family got in the car and drove to see the Grand Canyon or Yellowstone or the ocean. Space was just the next place to visit. Mars was just the next national park. You'd save up for it the way you saved up for anything else. You'd plan it months in advance, talk about it at dinner, count down the days. Your mother would read these articles, and you could see her thinking about it. What would it be like to cook dinner on a rocket ship? Would the food taste different? Would you have to learn new recipes? The magazine said no, everything would be normal. You'd have a refrigerator, a stove, running water. It would be like cooking in any modern kitchen, just with a better view out the window. She'd laugh at that, but you could tell she was imagining it. Imagining herself up there, setting the table, calling everyone to eat while Earth hung in the distance like a blue marble. Your father liked the technical details, how fast the ships would go, what kind of fuel they'd use, whether you could steer them yourself or if it would all be automatic. The magazines gave him answers. They showed diagrams, cutaways of the engines, charts of trajectories. It wasn't magic, it was engineering. And engineering was something that could be done, something that was being done right now in places like California and Florida and Texas. Men were working on it. Money was being spent. Progress was being made. You'd see families talking about it at church, at the grocery store, at backyard barbecues. Someone would mention they'd read an article about Mars colonies, and someone else would say they'd seen the same thing, and pretty soon everyone was discussing it. How long until regular people could go? Would it be expensive? Would you need special training, or could anyone do it? Most people figured 10 years, maybe 20, by 1970 or 1980 at the latest. And that seemed right. That seemed like enough time to work out the details and make it safe and affordable. After all, look how far we'd already come. Look at jets, at rockets, at all the things that seemed impossible just a generation ago. The paintings showed families from all walks of life, not just test pilots and astronauts, but regular people, a businessman reading a newspaper in his seat, a grandmother knitting, teenagers playing a game, bored with the view because they'd seen it before. That was the message. This wouldn't be rare. This wouldn't be special. This would be normal as flying to California was becoming, as normal as driving to the next state. Space was big, sure, but we'd figure it out. We always did. And you'd imagine your own family up there. What would you bring with you? What would you want to see first? Would you get your own window seat? Or would you have to share? Would there be other families on the ship? Other kids to talk to? Would you make friends with someone from another town, another state, and stay in touch after you both got home? It all seemed possible. It all seemed likely. The magazines kept coming, month after month, year after year. And the paintings kept showing the same thing. Families together, traveling through space, comfortable and safe, smiling, happy, heading somewhere new. It wasn't a dream, it was a plan. And plans, if you worked hard enough, if you believed in them enough, came true. That's what we'd learned. That's what history had taught us. So why would this be any different? The future of food was going to be different. You knew that from the articles, from the exhibitions at the World's Fair, from the demonstrations you'd see on television. And different didn't mean worse. It meant better. It meant easier. It meant your mother wouldn't have to spend hours in the kitchen anymore, wouldn't have to plan and shop and cook and clean up after every single meal. The future was going to set her free. They showed you pills, little capsules, each one a different color, each one containing everything your body needed for a whole meal. Breakfast in a pill, lunch in a pill, dinner in a pill. You'd take them with a glass of water, and that would be it. All the vitamins, all the protein, all the calories, everything balanced perfectly by scientists who knew exactly what a human body required. No more cooking, no more dishes, no more wondering if you were eating the right things. Your mother would see these demonstrations and she'd have questions. What would it taste like? The demonstrators would smile, whatever you wanted it to taste like. They were working on that. They could make a pill taste like roast beef, or apple pie, or anything else. Or maybe taste wouldn't matter anymore. Maybe we'd get used to it, the way we'd gotten used to other changes. Maybe the next generation wouldn't even think about it. Then there were the tubes, paste food squeezed out like toothpaste. The astronauts ate this way already, or they were going to. You'd seen pictures, a tube of meat, a tube of vegetables, a tube of dessert, each one labeled, each one nutritious, each one designed to be eaten in zero gravity where regular food would just float away. But it wasn't just for space, it was for Earth too, for busy people, for modern families, for anyone who didn't have time to sit down to a big traditional meal. The grocery stores started carrying some of these things. freeze-dried foods that came in packages, instant potatoes, instant coffee, Tang, the orange drink that the astronauts used. Your mother would bring them home and try them out. Sometimes they were good, sometimes they weren't. But that didn't matter. They were the start of something. They were the first step toward a kitchen that didn't need much cooking at all. At the World's Fair, they had whole exhibits about it. The kitchen of tomorrow. Everything was push-button. Everything was automatic. You'd press one button and the oven would heat up to exactly the right temperature. You'd press another and a meal would be prepared, perfectly portioned, perfectly timed. The woman demonstrating it wore a dress and heels and didn't have a single spot on her apron because there was nothing to spill, nothing to stir, nothing to watch over while it simmered. People watched these demonstrations with real interest. This wasn't fantasy. This was coming. The companies making these products were serious companies. General Electric, Westinghouse. They had engineers and laboratories and budgets. They showed you diagrams of how it all worked. They explained the science, and it made sense. If you could freeze dry food, if you could compress it, if you could make it last longer and take up less space, then why wouldn't you? Why would anyone choose the old way when the new way was so much better? Your mother's friends talked about it over coffee. How much time would it save? What would they do with all those extra hours? Maybe take a class, learn something new, maybe spend more time with the kids, maybe just relax, read a book, watch television without feeling guilty about all the work waiting in the kitchen. The future was going to give them their time back. That's what everyone said. That's what the magazines promised. And it wasn't just about saving time. It was about progress. It was about being modern. The families in the advertisements looked happy, looked free. They weren't tied to the stove. They weren't exhausted at the end of the day. They had energy left over for other things, for better things. And who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want a life where dinner didn't take 2 hours to prepare and another hour to clean up after? You'd see your mother reading these articles, really reading them, and you could tell she was trying to imagine it. A world where feeding a family wasn't so much work, where you didn't have to plan every meal days in advance, didn't have to stand over a hot stove in the summer, didn't have to scrub pots and pans until your hands were red. The future promised to take all of that away, and she wanted to believe it. We all did. Some people said the food wouldn't be as good, that there was something about a home-cooked meal that couldn't be replaced. But the experts disagreed. They said that was just nostalgia, just resistance to change. Once people got used to the new way, once they tasted how good the food could be, they'd wonder why they ever did it the old way. Progress always met resistance at first. That's what they said. That's what history showed. But progress always won in the end. The cities of the future weren't going to be on the ground. That was old thinking. That was the past. The future was up, above the clouds, above the weather, above all the problems that came with building on dirt and rock. The future was floating. You'd see the paintings in the magazines, and they took your breath away. Towers reaching up into the blue, so tall you couldn't see where they ended. Buildings connected by bridges, by moving walkways, by tubes you could walk through while cars and buses flew past outside. Everything was glass and steel and chrome. Everything caught the sunlight and threw it back in brilliant flashes. And at the very top, higher than anything else, there'd be platforms where small aircraft could land and take off, carrying people from one tower to another, from one city to another, quick as thought. The articles explained how it would work. The buildings would be so tall that the top floors would be above most of the weather. No more rain ruining your plans. No more snow to shovel. No more fog or smog or any of the things that made city life difficult. You'd live up where the air was clean and the sun always shone, and getting around would be easy. You wouldn't need a car, not in the traditional sense. You'd have a personal helicopter or something like it. Small, safe, automatic. You'd get in, tell it where you wanted to go, and it would take you there. Traffic jams would be a thing of the past. That's what everyone said. On the ground, sure, there were too many cars, too many roads, too much congestion. But in the air, there was room. Plenty of room. You could fly in any direction at any height. There'd be lanes, of course, rules to follow, but nothing like the stop-and-go frustration of rush hour. Your father would read about this, and you could see the relief on his face. He spent an hour every morning getting to work, an hour every evening getting home. The idea that his children wouldn't have to do the same thing, that they'd live in a world where you could just fly over all of that, must have seemed like a gift. The towers themselves would have everything you needed: apartments, offices, shops, schools, hospitals. You wouldn't have to go down to the ground if you didn't want to. You could live your whole life up there, moving from tower to tower, from platform to platform. And it wouldn't feel closed in or limited. The windows would be huge, floor to ceiling, giving you views that went on forever. You'd see other towers in the distance, other cities floating in the haze. You'd see the ground far below, green and peaceful, reserved for parks and farms and open space. At the World's Fair, they built models of these cities. You could walk around them, see how the buildings fit together, how the traffic would flow. Children would press their faces close to the glass cases, pointing at the tiny helicopters, the tiny people walking along the bridges. And the grown-ups would read the plaques that explained the engineering, the materials that would be used, the timeline for construction. 20 years, some said, 30 at the most. By 1980 or 1990, the first of these cities would be complete, and after that, more would follow. Dozens of them, hundreds. People talked about which city they'd want to live in. New York would have one, certainly. Chicago, Los Angeles. But there'd be new cities, too, built from scratch, not tied to any particular location. They could be anywhere. They could be everywhere. And because they'd be built all at once, they'd be perfect. None of the mistakes of the past. None of the crowding or pollution or chaos that came from cities growing too fast without planning. These would be designed, thought through, made right from the beginning. Your mother might have worried about raising children so high up. What if they fell? What if something went wrong? But the articles reassured her. The buildings would be safe. Safer than ground-level homes even. The windows wouldn't open far enough for anyone to fall through. The walkways would have railings, barriers, safety systems, and the helicopters, the personal aircraft, they'd be automatic. You couldn't crash them even if you tried. Computers would handle all the hard parts. You'd just sit back and enjoy the ride. And there was something exciting about it, something that made sense. We'd conquered the ground. We'd built cities from coast to coast, but we'd also made mistakes. We'd let things get messy and complicated and hard to fix. So why not start fresh? Why not take what we'd learned and build something better, something cleaner, something more beautiful? Why not go up instead of out? The sky was empty. The sky was waiting. The sky was ours. The paintings showed people living their lives up there, families having picnics on rooftop gardens, children playing in parks that floated between the towers, business people meeting in offices with views that stretched to the horizon. Everyone looked happy. Everyone looked comfortable. This wasn't some cold, strange future. This was just life, but better, easier, more convenient, more modern. And at night, the cities would glow. Every tower lit from within, every bridge outlined in lights. From the ground, looking up, it would be like seeing stars, but closer, brighter, more beautiful. The cities would hang in the darkness like jewels, and you'd know that up there, people were living the way we'd always dreamed of living. Free from the old problems, free from the old limits, free to be whatever the future would let us be. There was a time when we weren't afraid of the atom. We were excited by it. We saw what it could do, what it could be, and we believed it would change everything for the better. The atom was going to be our friend, our servant, our key to a future where energy was cheap and plentiful and clean. The magazines explained it in simple terms. Inside every atom was enormous power, more power than you could imagine, locked away in something too small to see, and scientists had figured out how to unlock it. They'd learned how to split the atom, to release that power in a controlled way, to turn it into electricity, into heat, into motion. It was the greatest discovery of the age, maybe the greatest discovery ever. And the best part was, it was safe. That's what they told us. That's what we read in the articles, what we heard from the experts on television. Yes, there were bombs. Yes, the atom could be dangerous if you used it wrong. But used right, used carefully, used the way scientists intended, it was perfectly safe. Safer than coal, safer than oil, safer than anything we'd been using before. And so much more powerful. A tiny amount of fuel could run a city for years. A pellet no bigger than your fingertip could power a car for its entire lifetime. The power plants were already being built. You'd see pictures of them in the newspapers, huge concrete domes rising up next to rivers or oceans. Inside, reactors that would generate electricity day and night, year after year, without smoke, without pollution, without using up mountains of coal or lakes of oil. The electricity would be so cheap that companies wouldn't even bother to put meters on your house. That's what some people said. That's what some experts predicted. Why measure it when there was more than enough for everyone? But it wasn't just power plants. The atom was going to be everywhere. In your car, for one thing. Instead of filling up with gasoline every week, you'd have a tiny reactor under the hood. It would run for years without refueling. You'd never have to stop at a gas station again. You'd just get in and drive, and the car would take care of itself. The engine would be quiet, smooth, powerful. And when you were finally done with the car, when you'd driven it for a decade or more, you'd take it back to the manufacturer and they'd replace the reactor and you'd be good for another decade. Your home would have its own reactor too. A small one, safe and sealed, probably in the basement or in a utility closet. It would power everything. The lights, the refrigerator, the television, the air conditioning. You'd never get an electric bill. You'd never worry about blackouts or brownouts or any of the problems that came with the old power grid. Your home would be independent, self-sufficient, running on the atom. At the World's Fair, they demonstrated all of this. They had a working reactor you could walk right up to, see through thick glass. It glowed with a beautiful blue light. The guides explained that the glow was perfectly safe, that you could stand there all day and be fine. And people did stand there watching it, marveling at it. This was the future. This was the power that would run everything. They showed you concept cars with sleek designs and no exhaust pipes. They showed you homes that looked normal from the outside but had no power lines connecting to them. They showed you factories, farms, hospitals, schools, all running on atomic power. And it all made sense. Why burn things when you could use the atom? Why dig up coal and pump out oil when you could get so much more energy from something so much smaller and cleaner? Your father would talk about it with his friends. How long before atomic cars were affordable? How long before every home had its own reactor? The estimates varied, but most people thought 10 or 15 years. By 1970, certainly. Maybe sooner. The technology was there. It was just a matter of building enough reactors, training enough workers, setting up the systems to make it all work. But those were details. Those were things that could be solved. And the atom would do more than just provide power. It would help us grow food. Atomic energy could be used to make fertilizer, to purify water, to extend growing seasons. Deserts could bloom. Frozen lands could thaw. Hunger could become a thing of the past, not just in America, but everywhere. The atom was that powerful. The atom was that generous. There'd be atomic ships, too. Not just submarines, though those were impressive enough, but cargo ships, passenger liners, even pleasure boats. They'd never need to refuel. They'd cross the ocean again and again, year after year, powered by a core that would last longer than the ship itself. And atomic planes, though those were further off. The experts were working on it. The engines were tricky. The shielding was complicated. But it would happen. We'd fly from New York to London on atomic power, faster and higher than ever before. People trusted the atom because they trusted the scientists. These were serious men, educated men, men who'd won the war with their knowledge and were now turning that knowledge to peaceful purposes. If they said the atom was safe, then it was safe. If they said it would change the world, then it would change the world. We'd seen what they could do. We'd seen the impossible become possible. So when they told us about this new future, this atomic age, we believed them. Why wouldn't we? The atom was progress. The atom was hope. The atom was the answer to so many problems that had seemed unsolvable. Energy shortages? Gone. Pollution? Gone. Limits on what we could build, where we could go, how we could live? Gone. The atom would free us from all of that. The atom would open doors we didn't even know existed, and we welcomed it. We wanted it. We couldn't wait for it to arrive. The robot was coming, not someday far off in the distant future, but soon, maybe in 10 years, maybe in 5. The magazines showed you what it would look like. chrome-plated, humanoid, with a smooth round head and glowing eyes, strong enough to lift heavy things but gentle enough to hand you a cup of coffee. Smart enough to understand your commands, but obedient enough to never question them. Your personal servant, your helper, your friend. You'd seen Robbie in the movies, walking and talking and doing all sorts of useful things. And that wasn't just Hollywood magic. That was a preview. The technology was real. The engineers were working on it. In laboratories all across the country, robots were being built, tested, improved. They were getting better every year, more capable, more reliable. And soon, very soon, you'd be able to buy one for your home. What would you use it for? Everything. That was the promise. The robot would mow your lawn, trim your hedges, wash your car. It would vacuum your carpets, dust your furniture, wash your windows. It would carry groceries, take out the trash, shovel snow from your driveway. All the chores you hated, all the work that took up your weekends, the robot would do. And you'd be free to relax, to play with your kids, to pursue hobbies, to live the way you wanted to live. Your mother would have her own uses for the robot. Cooking, cleaning, laundry. Not that the robot would replace her, of course not. But it would help. It would make things easier. The robot could stir the pot while she set the table. It could fold the clothes while she ironed the shirts. It could scrub the floors while she dusted the shelves. They'd work together, the two of them, and the house would run smoother than ever. At the World's Fair, they had demonstrations. A robot serving drinks. A robot playing the piano. A robot walking down a set of stairs, turning, walking back up. The crowds watched in amazement, not because it was so strange, but because it was so close. You could see how it worked. You could imagine having one at home. The guide would explain that these were early models, prototypes, but that the final versions would be even better, smarter, more useful, more affordable. The articles talked about the price. How much would a personal robot cost? Estimates varied, but most put it somewhere around the price of a car. Maybe a little more at first, but coming down quickly as production ramped up. And unlike a car, the robot wouldn't need gas. It would run on electricity, charging itself overnight while you slept. By morning, it would be ready to go again, ready for another full day of work. You'd give your robot a name. Everyone agreed on that. It wouldn't be just a machine. It would be part of the family. Not like a person, exactly, but more than a tool. Something in between. Your robot would know your voice, recognize your face, remember your preferences. Over time, it would learn your routines, anticipate your needs. You wouldn't have to tell it to mow the lawn every Saturday. It would just know. It would just do it. The kids would love it. Your children would talk to the robot, ask it questions, maybe even play games with it. The robot would be patient, never tired, never annoyed. It would help with homework, explaining math problems or history facts. It would read bedtime stories in a calm, soothing voice, and it would keep the children safe, watching over them when you had to step away for a moment, making sure nothing bad happened. Your father saw practical applications. The robot could help him in the garage, holding tools, handing him parts, providing light while he worked under the car. The robot could help with yard work, carrying lumber, mixing concrete, doing the heavy lifting that got harder as you got older. And if something broke in the house, the robot might even be able to fix it. Not everything, not complicated things, but simple repairs. A leaky faucet, a loose hinge, the basic maintenance that every house needed. People talked about what their robots would look like. Would you want yours to look human or more like a machine? Some preferred the human look. It felt friendlier, more approachable. Others liked the mechanical look. It was honest. It reminded you what the robot really was. And maybe you could customize it. Choose the color, the size, the features. Make it fit your home, your style, your life. There were jokes about it, too. What if the robot got confused? What if it mowed the flower bed instead of the lawn? What if it served dinner to the dog instead of the family? People laughed about these possibilities, but they didn't really worry. The engineers would work out the bugs. That's what engineers did. By the time robots were available to the public, they'd be reliable. They'd be tested. They'd work the way they were supposed to work. And robots wouldn't just be in homes. They'd be everywhere, In factories, doing the dangerous jobs that hurt people. In hospitals, helping nurses and doctors. In offices, filing papers and delivering mail. On farms, picking crops and tending animals. The whole world would be different, easier, more efficient. And people would be free to do more interesting things, more creative things, more human things. The robots would take care of the rest. The future with robots wasn't scary. It was exciting. It was logical. We'd invented machines to help us with hard work before. The tractor, the washing machine, the vacuum cleaner. The robot was just the next step. A machine that could do more, help more, free us more. And we were ready for it. We wanted it. We looked forward to the day when we could walk into a store, pick out a robot, bring it home, and start living the easier life we'd been promised. The telephone was already amazing, but it was about to get better, much better. Soon you wouldn't just hear the person on the other end. You'd see them, right there in your living room on a screen, as clear as if they were standing in front of you. The videophone was coming, and it was going to change the way families stayed connected. The magazines showed you what it would look like. A telephone with a screen attached, about the size of a small television. You'd sit in front of it, and when you called someone, their face would appear. And they'd see you too, of course. You'd talk face to face, even if you were 1,000 miles apart, even if you were on opposite coasts. Distance wouldn't matter anymore. For mothers especially, this was exciting. If your daughter got married and moved away, if your son took a job in another state, you could still see them. Not just once a year at Christmas, but whenever you wanted. Every week if you liked. Every day. You could watch your grandchildren grow up, see their faces, watch them smile and laugh. You wouldn't miss those years. You wouldn't have to rely on photographs and letters and the occasional visit. The videophone would bring them to you. Your father saw different possibilities. Business meetings without traveling. You could talk to a client in New York while sitting in your office in Chicago. You could see the product they were selling, watch them demonstrate it, all through the screen. No more expensive trips, no more time wasted on trains or planes. Just pick up the videophone, dial the number, and there they were. The technology was real. That's what the articles emphasized. This wasn't fantasy. Bell Telephone was working on it. Other companies too. They'd already built prototypes. They'd already conducted tests. At the World's Fair, you could see it in action. You'd sit in a booth and someone in another booth across the pavilion would call you, and there they'd be on the screen. You could wave at them and they'd wave back. You could make faces and they'd laugh. It worked. It really worked. The experts predicted videophones would be common by the 1970s. Maybe sooner. The infrastructure was already there. The phone lines, the equipment. It was just a matter of adding the cameras and screens, upgrading the system, training the operators. And once it was available, everyone would want one. Who wouldn't? Who would choose to just hear a voice when they could see the person too? There was talk about what this would mean for everyday life. You'd have to dress nicely before making a call. You'd have to make sure the room behind you looked presentable. That made some people laugh. Your mother might have to fix her hair and put on lipstick just to call the grocery store. But that seemed like a small price to pay for such an amazing capability. And it wasn't just about personal calls. You'd be able to shop from home. Really shop, not just order from a catalog. The store would show you items on their videophone, hold them up to the camera, let you see them from different angles. You could ask questions, get immediate answers, and when you decided what you wanted, they'd deliver it to your house. No more driving to the store, fighting crowds, searching for parking. Shopping would become easy, convenient, something you could do in your pajamas if you wanted. Doctors could use videophones too. If you weren't feeling well, you could call your doctor, let him see you, describe your symptoms while he looked at you. He might be able to diagnose you right there, prescribe medicine, save you a trip to the office. For people in rural areas, people far from hospitals, this would be especially valuable. The videophone would bring medical care to everyone, no matter where they lived. Teachers talked about using them in schools. A famous expert could give a lecture to students across the country, all at the same time, all seeing him on their screens. Students in a small town in Iowa could learn from the same professors that students in Boston learned from. Education would be equal, available to everyone, no matter where you happen to live. The videophone would make the world smaller. That's what people said. Your cousin in California, your aunt in Florida, your old friend who moved to Texas, they'd all be right there when you needed them. You'd be able to stay close to the people you cared about, even when life took them far away. Distance would become meaningless. Separation would lose its sting. And think about emergencies. If something happened, if someone needed help, you could see the situation immediately. You could give better advice, provide better assistance because you could see what was going on. The videophone would make us all more connected, more aware, more able to help each other when it mattered most. Young people especially would love it. Imagine being able to see your boyfriend or girlfriend when they called. Imagine having a conversation where you could see their face, read their expressions, feel like you were really together even when you weren't. The videophone would make long-distance relationships easier, more bearable, maybe even normal. Some people wondered about privacy. Would you want everyone to see into your home? Would you want them to see you in your casual clothes, your messy hair, your unpainted face? But the experts had thought of that. You could turn the camera off if you wanted. You could choose to just use the audio, just like a regular phone call. The videophone would give you options. You'd use it when you wanted to, the way you wanted to. The future with videophones was a future where nobody was really alone, where everybody was just a call away, just a screen away, where families stayed families no matter how far apart they lived, where business was faster, shopping was easier, learning was better. The videophone was going to connect us all, bring us all together, make the world feel like one big neighborhood, where everyone could see everyone else. And that seemed like a good thing. That seemed like exactly the kind of future we wanted. The moon wasn't just a place we'd visit someday. It was going to be a place where people lived, where people worked, where people raised their families and built their homes and made their lives. The moon was going to be our next frontier, as real and settled as the West had been for our grandparents. You'd see the plans in the magazines. Domes on the lunar surface, transparent and strong, protecting entire towns from the airless cold outside. Inside the domes, there'd be streets and houses and shops, parks with trees and grass, somehow growing despite being so far from Earth. Children playing in playgrounds, running and laughing under that big Earth hanging in the black sky. It looked different from home, certainly, but it also looked normal, comfortable, livable. The articles explained how it would work. We'd send up construction crews first. They'd build the bases, set up the life support systems, test everything to make sure it was safe. Then families would follow. Scientists, engineers, teachers, doctors, all the people you needed to make a community work. And they wouldn't just be visiting, they'd be staying. Years at a time, maybe their whole lives. The moon would be their home. What would it be like to grow up on the moon? That's what you wondered. Would the children born there feel different? Would they miss Earth, or would the moon be all they knew? They'd be lighter there, that's for sure. Gravity on the moon was weaker, so you could jump higher, lift heavier things, move in ways that were impossible on Earth. Recess at school would be something to see. Kids bouncing around, playing games that couldn't be played anywhere else. Your father might have thought about working there. The pay would be good, they said, better than Earth, because not everyone would want to go. There'd be opportunities, chances to advance, ways to provide for your family that might not exist at home. And the companies that needed workers on the moon were serious companies. Mining companies, construction companies, research organizations. They had money. They had plans. They were already hiring people, already training them, already preparing for the day when the moon bases would open. At the World's Fair, they built a model of a moon base. You could walk through it, see the living quarters, the work areas, the common spaces where people would gather. It all looked surprisingly normal. The beds looked like regular beds. The kitchen looked like a regular kitchen. The furniture, the decorations, the pictures on the walls. They wanted you to understand that life on the moon wouldn't be that different from life on Earth. You'd still have your comfort. You'd still have your routines. You'd still have a home. The trip to the moon would take a few days. Less than a week, certainly. You'd board a ship at a spaceport in Florida or Texas, strap yourself in, and off you'd go. The ride would be smooth, the experts promised. No more violent shaking like the early rockets. By the time regular people were flying to the moon, the technology would be refined, perfected, safe. You'd barely feel the takeoff. You'd barely notice when you left Earth's atmosphere and entered the emptiness of space. And once you were there, once you'd landed and settled in, you'd be able to call home. The videophone would work even from the moon. There'd be a delay, a second or two, because of the distance, but you'd still be able to see your family, talk to them, share your experiences. Your mother could see where you lived. Your father could see where you worked. Your friends could hear about what it was like to walk on the surface in a suit, to look up and see Earth in the sky, to be part of something so new and different and important. They talked about tourism, too. Moon resorts, moon hotels. Once the bases were established and everything was running smoothly, regular people could visit. You'd save up for it the way you saved up for any big vacation. You'd book a trip, pack your bags, and go. You'd stay in a hotel with a view of Earth. You'd take a tour of the surface, collect moon rocks, take photographs, and then you'd come home with stories that would last the rest of your life. Children drew pictures of moon bases in school. They wrote essays about what they'd do if they lived there, what they'd see, what they'd miss about Earth. Teachers encouraged this. They told their students that some of them really might go to the moon someday, that it wasn't just a dream, that the future was being built right now, and they could be part of it if they worked hard, studied science and math, prepared themselves for opportunities that were coming. The moon would have jobs that didn't exist on Earth. Mining, for one thing. There were valuable resources on the moon, metals and minerals that were rare on Earth. People would extract them, process them, send them back home. And research. Scientists studying the moon itself, learning about how it formed, what it was made of, how it related to Earth. And astronomy. Telescopes on the moon would see things that telescopes on Earth couldn't because there was no atmosphere to look through, no air to blur the image. But it wouldn't be all work. There'd be entertainment. Movie theaters, restaurants, sports facilities. People would need those things. People would want normal lives, even on the moon, so businesses would open to provide them. And maybe some of those businesses would become famous. Maybe you'd hear about a restaurant on the moon that served the best food in the solar system. Maybe you'd want to go there someday, see it for yourself. The moon was close. That's what made it feel so possible. You could see it from your backyard. You could point to it and know that soon people would be there, living there. And maybe someday you'd be there too. Maybe someday, going to the moon would be as normal as going to another state. Maybe your grandchildren would think nothing of it. They'd mention a friend who lived on the moon the way you mentioned a friend who lived in California, and that would be normal. That would be the world they grew up in. Mars was next. After the moon, Mars. It made sense. It followed naturally. The moon was practice, a place to learn, a place to build our confidence and our skills. But Mars was the real goal. Mars was where humanity would truly prove itself, where we'd show that we could live not just on other worlds, but thrive there. The magazine showed you what Mars could be. Red dust and rust-colored rocks, sure, but also potential. So much potential. Mars had water, or it used to. Mars had an atmosphere. Thin, but there. Mars had seasons, weather, days almost as long as Earth days. It was different from Earth, yes, but not impossibly different. Not so strange that we couldn't adapt. Not so harsh that we couldn't survive. The scientists talked about changing Mars, making it more like Earth. They called it something fancy, but the idea was simple. Warm up the planet, thicken the atmosphere, melt the ice, get water flowing again, and then over time, introduce plants. Start with simple ones, tough ones, the kind that could handle harsh conditions. Let them spread, let them grow, let them make oxygen, and eventually, after years or decades or maybe a century, Mars would be green. Mars would have forests and fields. Mars would have rain. It seemed like a lot of work, but it also seemed possible. We'd changed Earth, after all. We'd built dams and cities and turned deserts into farmland. If we could do that at home, why not on Mars? Why not take a dead world and bring it to life? It would be the greatest achievement in human history. It would be something that would be remembered forever. The first Mars bases would be like the moon bases, but bigger. They'd have to be. Mars was farther away. You couldn't just go home if something went wrong. The people who went to Mars would be there for years at a time. They'd need everything: food, water, air, shelter, tools, medicine. They'd need to be self-sufficient, able to handle whatever problems came up without help from Earth. But they wouldn't be lonely. That's what the articles emphasized. There'd be hundreds of people at each base, maybe thousands. Enough to form real communities. Enough to have schools and hospitals and all the things that made a place feel like home. And over time, as more people came, as more bases were built, Mars would develop its own culture, its own way of doing things, its own identity. Your children might go to Mars. That's what you thought about. Maybe not your children, maybe your grandchildren, but someone in your family, someone you knew and loved, might be part of that first generation of Mars settlers. And what would you tell them? Would you encourage them to go to be part of something historic? Or would you ask them to stay, to keep the family together, to not go so far away that you might never see them again? The trip to Mars would take months, 6 months, 8 months, depending on the orbits, depending on when Earth and Mars were closest together. That was a long time to be in space, a long time to be cooped up in a ship with the same people, eating the same food, looking at the same walls. But the ships would be comfortable. They'd have to be. Private rooms, common areas, exercise equipment to keep your muscles strong, windows to look out of, to see the stars, to watch Earth shrink and Mars grow. And when you finally arrived, when you finally landed, what would it feel like to step out onto Mars for the first time, to be one of the first humans to walk on another planet, to look around at a landscape no one from Earth had ever seen up close? It would be overwhelming. It would be incredible. It would be something you'd think about every day for the rest of your life. The children born on Mars would be different. They'd have to be. They'd grow up knowing Earth only from pictures and videos. They'd grow up under a different sky, in weaker gravity, breathing air that came from machines. They'd be Martians in a way, the first Martians. And what would they think of Earth? Would they want to visit, to see where their parents came from, or would Mars be enough for them? There was talk of what would come after Mars, other planets, other moons, maybe settlements on the moons of Jupiter, floating cities in the clouds of Venus, mining operations in the asteroid belt. The solar system was huge. There was room for everyone, room for growth, room for expansion, room for all the people who wanted to be part of this new age of exploration. But Mars was the key. Mars was the test. If we could settle Mars, if we could make it work, then we could settle anywhere. Mars would prove that humans weren't bound to Earth, weren't limited to one world. Mars would open the door to everything else. Your father might have talked about it with his friends, standing around in someone's backyard on a summer evening, looking up at the sky, trying to spot Mars, that little red dot among all the others, wondering what it would look like in 50 years, in 100, wondering if anyone they knew would ever walk there, live there, die there. It seemed so far away, but also so close, so impossible, but also so inevitable. The future included Mars. Everyone agreed on that. It wasn't a question of if, but when. And probably not that far off when. Maybe 30 years, maybe 40. Long enough that you might not see it yourself, but short enough that your children probably would. And that was exciting. That was something to hope for. That was something to tell your grandchildren about when they asked what you believed in when you were young. We believed all of it. That's the important thing to remember. We really believed. It wasn't that we were foolish or naive. It was that everything we saw, everything we heard, everything we read told us the same story. The future was coming. The future was bright. The future was going to be amazing. And why wouldn't we believe? Look at what had already happened in our lifetimes. We'd seen things our parents never dreamed of. Television, jets, antibiotics, electricity in every home, cars that almost anyone could afford. We'd gone from farms to cities, from horse-drawn carriages to airplanes that could cross the ocean in hours. Progress wasn't just real. It was everywhere. It was obvious. It was the defining fact of modern life. So when the magazines showed us rocket ships and moon bases and atomic cars, we didn't think they were making it up. We thought they were showing us what was next, what was coming, what was already being built in laboratories and factories we'd never seen. And the people telling us these things weren't dreamers or con artists. They were scientists, engineers, experts with degrees from important universities, people who'd built the atomic bomb, who'd split the atom, who'd invented radar and computers and all the other miracles of the age. If they said we were going to Mars, then we were going to Mars. Your parents believed it. Your teachers believed it. Your neighbors believed it. It was everywhere. This sense of anticipation, this feeling that the world was about to change in ways that would make everything better, easier, more exciting, more full of possibility. And you grew up soaking in that belief, absorbing it, making it part of how you understood the world. Saturday mornings you watched the shows and you knew that what you were seeing would be real someday soon. The magazines came and you read them and you planned for a future that included trips to the moon and meals from tubes and robots to help with chores. At school, your teachers told you to study hard because the future would need scientists and engineers and people who understood how things worked. And you did study because you wanted to be part of it. You wanted to help build that future. You wanted to live in it. The World's Fair was full of it. Crowds of people walking through exhibits, looking at models and demonstrations, listening to presenters talk about what was coming. And nobody was laughing. Nobody was rolling their eyes. Everybody was interested. Everybody was excited. Everybody was thinking about how their lives would change, how their children's lives would be different, how the world of 1980 or 1990 or 2000 would be unrecognizable compared to the world they knew. And then we waited. We kept waiting. The moon happened, yes. Men walked on the moon. But then it stopped. The bases weren't built. The hotels weren't opened. Mars stayed empty. The atomic cars never appeared. The robots never came home with us. The food from tubes stayed in space, stayed with the astronauts, never became part of everyday life. The flying cars, the floating cities, the videophones that would replace regular phones. None of it came the way we thought it would. Some of it came eventually, in different forms. We got computers, the internet, phones that let us see each other when we talk. But they didn't feel the same. They didn't feel like the future we were promised. They felt like something else, something we hadn't quite imagined, something that solved different problems than the ones we thought needed solving. And that's okay. The world we got isn't a bad world. It has its own wonders, its own achievements, things our younger selves never would have imagined. But it's different from what we expected, different from what we were told to expect. And sometimes when you think about it, there's a little sadness there. Not because what we have is disappointing, but because what we lost was possibility itself. That feeling that anything could happen, that feeling that the future was wide open and waiting for us. We remember those Saturday mornings, those magazines, those exhibits at the World's Fair. We remember what it felt like to believe that the moon would be settled in our lifetimes, that Mars would follow, that space would become normal, accessible, part of everyday life. We remember planning for it, dreaming about it, assuming it would happen because everybody said it would. And we weren't wrong to believe. We weren't foolish. We were living in a time when big things were happening fast, when the impossible kept becoming possible, when every year brought new breakthroughs, new inventions, new reasons to think that anything could be achieved if we just tried hard enough. We believed because we had evidence. We believed because we had experience. We believed because belief made sense. The future we were promised didn't arrive, but we remember it anyway. We remember what it looked like in those paintings, what it sounded like in those television shows, what it felt like to imagine yourself there, living in that world, being part of that great adventure. And that memory, that feeling, that sense of living at a time when humanity was about to leap forward into something new and grand, that's ours. That's something nobody can take away. We were there. We saw it. We believed it. And for a while when we were young and the world was changing fast and anything seemed possible, we lived in that future even though it never quite came to be. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's its own kind of gift. The memory of a future that was real to us, even if it never became real for anyone else.